Hey guys, what is going on, and welcome back to another Jujutsu Kaisen Modulo chapter spoiler summary. Today we are going to go over chapter 8, and of course I want to make it very clear that keep things in mind that these are just raw translations. As always, we are going to do our best as a community to support the official release. This is not a market substitute, and all this is a pure commentary, reaction, and review of the new information that is coming out about the series. And to be completely honest with you, I am always interested to get new lore, especially with the way that Gege Akutami's pen has been crafting these pieces of dialogue. So you already know when it comes to a flashback chapter, even though this might be a little bit slower and there isn't any action going on, I am more than happy to learn about the past of any of these characters that have been introduced, especially when it comes to the Sumerians. And this chapter focuses primarily on the twins Maru and Cross, going back to when they were just two children. So make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you don't want to miss any future Jujutsu Kaisen Modulo content, because I do videos on the side, not just chapter reviews. And also if you're interested on things like Kagurabachi, Sakamoto Days, Dandadan, Chainsaw Man, or Gachiakuta, feel free to subscribe and check those videos out. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, and most importantly, check out the main channel if you want more long-form content. Let's not waste any more time, guys, and let's get right into the spoiler summary. So to start everything off, we get a brief black page with a small rock in the middle, describing the chapter as the three heavenly cursed gods. And we get a small proverb saying that when gods clashed, the heavens trembled and the seas roared. Those who survived that ancient cataclysm would pass down forbidden rites and the words of those gods. However, even now, it's said those gods sleep beneath the sacred stones. The story of those gods' demise starts again, and a prayer for salvation echoes throughout the wasteland of before. May that curse be lifted one day. I have to imagine this is a direct reference to the curse, quote unquote, of coexistence and how species are doomed to constantly repeat the cycle of violence. And we're hoping that one day we can lift that curse and live in peace. And as we move on to the next page, which actually starts the full chapter, we see a full-grown adult Sumerian with long flowing hair talking to a much smaller, shorter, and older merchant-looking Sumerian. It's very clear that the Sumerian people look pretty much almost identical to humans, besides the third eye. The taller Sumerian with long flowing hair is known as Dora, and it's just going to make it easier to refer to him by his name as we go through these spoilers. Dora, after talking with the merchant and going and learning that he has just caught two small Sumerian children, explains that after catching them, he might as well just feed them something and send them back out into the wild. The merchant says that's easy for Dora to say, but with how things are, the kids are starving, and it wouldn't be strange if those kids ended up turning around and becoming thieves or criminals later on. The merchant mentions to Dora that in the camp that they're living in, there are plenty of jobs that even small children could do. So if they end up showing a little bit of skill, the adults can teach them a trade and they can become valuable members of their camp. Dora is surprised to hear that the old man is much more lenient on the children than he thought he would be, admitting that it's definitely better than wasting two small lives for absolutely nothing. And of course, we see that these two children are Cross and Maru, who can't be more than 10 years old at this point. Dora is surprised there's two kids in the cell, and upon releasing them, Maru immediately starts jumping around and trying to throw hands with Dora, and Dora just blocks every single punch. Cross then tries to slip in from behind, but Dora just absolutely backhands them both and throws them into the wall. And honestly, not even mad at all. He's actually surprised to see that these two kids still have some spirit in them, saying that that's good. Clearly, they're incapacitated and knocked out, and Dora tells the two kids once they've cooled off that they need to come help him with work, and if they do a good job, he'll feed them. The plan is to build a canal. Some time passes, and Cross and Maru become adjusted to the environment that they're in, and they do eventually start working for Dora. Dora says that he's just going to keep digging while they go ahead and gather stones and stack them neatly over there. He tells the kids to ignore the stones on the other side, but somehow, even while they do a, quote unquote good job, they are still getting into small quarrels and sibling fights because, you know what, not for nothing, even Dora says it, they seem to be quite the troublemakers. However, he thinks to himself that a little bit of forced labor is exactly what they need to straighten out, and honestly, knocking some sense into them was the right call. More time time continues to pass and the kids end up being bored with just manual labor. He thinks to himself he can give them plenty of stones to pick up, finding a giant boulder in the area that is way bigger than he thought it would be, telling Maru and Cross to stand back as he gets in the stance, charges up, and throws a fistful of energy right into the rock, completely obliterating it and scattering multiple stones all around the area for Cross and Maru to pick up. Again, Dora did this as a punishment, but when he turns around, Cross and Maru are just absolutely awestruck and just completely idolizing this man now. And a short little time skip again goes on when Dora and the two kids are just having a lunch break after a hard day's work. Maru, ever inquisitive and the loudmouth, as Cross would say, is asking Dora why he wants to build a canal, or at least that's the word he thinks Dora was using, because again, these guys are still kids at this point. Dora is surprised that Maru and Cross would have no idea why they're even working so hard. We do seem to get a small map of the country that the Sumerian people, or at least this camp of Sumerian people, are living on. They're on a small speck of land that on the other side of another large mountain range and a good bit of lake, there is another camp of Sumerians. When doing things like trade and travel, they have to take a very long sea route all the way around, and it's a very large detour. So if they are able to build a canal, they can essentially speed up the process significantly and make it much easier for the two camps to connect and communicate. Maru is happily shocked that they would think of such a good idea. However, Cross, ever the pessimist, asks Dora why the canal has to be there. I want to make it very clear that a lot of these names and things like that I may pronounce wrong, just because again, these are raw translations, so I apologize ahead of time. However, I'm going to do my best here with what I've got, because it seems like Cross is interrupting here because this is the origins of his prejudice against other peoples. He feels the exact same way about humanity as he may have felt about these people known as the Discante, because the camp of Sumerian aliens that they belong to are known as the Loomer. However, it seems like a long time ago, there was an incident that occurred that separated the Loomer from all other tribes of Sumerian. And according to Cross, it was the Discante that forced the Loomer tribe onto this parched land where he claims no proper crops grow, and it's probably much harder to live than all of the other Sumerian people. However, Dora tells an interesting tale of the Sumerian people's history, because he explains that the canal was not a new idea and it's something that was planned long ago. However, it was halted due to the existence of the Kerrion, or maybe it's Kerrion. Again, I do apologize. This creature, I'm going to say Kerrion, is a sacred creature for the Sumerian people. Not necessarily a god, but a very legendary mythical beast for them. Over time, this beast eventually began to hunt the Sumerian people. Everyone was driven out of their homes. People's parents were killed. Every Sumerian alien except the Loomer tribe. For some reason, when a Kerrion attacks, it eats anyone that is not of Loomer blood. So when it came time for the Sumerian people to decide if they should exterminate the Kerrions or not, the Loomer were the only one that protested in their sacred creature's survival. And since this entire area is Kerrion habitat, when the original canal was planned, all of the Discante tribe's workers were attacked and the entire project was halted, which not only stranded the Loomer people in that land, it also means the Loomer people are the only ones that are going to be able to actually fulfill the canal's conditions, because they're the only ones that won't get hunted by the Kerrion. And it shows two entirely different sides and perspectives. Cross, who sees this as the Loomer just doing the Discante's dirty work so that way they can trade better. Dora sees this as the Loomer doing things for the Loomer tribe, because at the end of the day, the strength of the canal will translate into power for the Loomer people, something that as a child, Cross most likely won't understand the long-term effects of. Dora explains that even if they get attacked, if they just keep responding and counterattacking, nothing's ever gonna change. If the Loomer aren't able to make the big decisions and forgive first, then the Discante won't ever be the bigger people either. Dora says that in order for people of different lands and bloodlines to coexist, they have to share something in common, something that connects them through both time time and space, saying that when people live side by side, having something that passes between them makes it so much easier to accept everyone else's differences. And Dora thinks that canal could be exactly what brings those people together, something that creates a link between the Loomer and Discante. When the canal is complete, they can draw water from the Loomer rivers to the nearby villages, having that water flow through all of the settlements and farmlands of the Discante. But on top of that, their quote-unquote parched land, as Cross explains it, will no longer be dry, and they'll be able to keep water flowing constantly and also keep people alive longer, which shows the difference of how Cross thinks compared to how other people may believe. Cross thinks short term, whereas someone like Dora, who focuses on coexistence and understands that coexistence isn't always easy, sometimes you may have to make sacrifices. Does that make you look weak? Maybe in the beginning. However, as Dora describes, not only will creating this canal end up helping the Discante, but at the end of the day, it's going to help the Loomer. And in the long term, this may end up creating a power balance between the Loomer and the Discante, as opposed to them just constantly fighting back and forth. A clear, obvious symbolism and parallel to the fight and possible war that the humans and Sumerian people may get into, which clearly gets across that whatever lesson Dora was trying to input into Cross did not imprint. However, for Maru, it might have, because it seems like after this conversation, Cross stopped showing up to help build the canal, whereas Maru continues to show up every single day. Dora is upset about this, but I guess he understands, considering he knows that Cross is just sulking about the whole idea, not able to understand what Dora's adult mind can view compared to, again, Cross's very narrow-minded child brain, which is ironic considering he was just telling Yuka that her thinking was narrow. And just like Yuka, Dora actually admits that Cross's way of thinking isn't necessarily wrong. Honestly, that's probably what the majority of people are gonna believe. Everyone thinks that this is just the way the world works and they just go ahead and do what they want, which is ironically what ended up leaving Dora to build the canal alone in the first place. As Dora and Maru get to the part of the project they were working on yesterday, suddenly they realize the entire embankment that they dug out collapsed and basically reset them back to zero. Both Maru and Dora look up to see Cross above all of the debris, and Maru is in disbelief, knowing in his heart of hearts that Cross, no matter how mad he was, would never do something like this. And Dora, who's silent at first, agrees with Cross, realizing that there's no way Cross would do this, and it's most likely that there are others trying to take advantage of the situation, noting that there's most likely some new scum that slipped into their camp and they're gonna have to deal with them before getting back to work. Before we cut to where Cross ran off to, in a conversation with a bunch of local Sumerian loomers in a camp below. All of them are bad-mouthing Daru, saying that it's completely ill-advised to start trading with Discante, and they should never work with them. They even start spreading rumors that Dora is getting paid by the Discante to build the canal. It was these Sumerians that sabotaged the project, and knowing that Dora is just gonna keep building it no matter what, as long as he's the only one that works on it, they'll just keep destroying it every time he goes to build it. However, one of the Sumerians brings up the idea that instead of dealing with all of that hassle, why don't they teach Dora a lesson physically, when suddenly Cross makes an appearance, putting two and two together and tying the criminals right back to the crime. The Sumerians are surprised to see him, immediately recognizing Cross as one of Dora's twins, when out of nowhere, Cross deals a massive blow to the face to one of the Sumerian people, most likely getting his get back for his pseudo-father Dora. Afterwards, Cross returns to Maru and Dora, telling them not to misunderstand, but that he just couldn't stand to see them both be alone. And we get many more time skips as we see time go on, but after many years of hard efforts to when Maru and Cross are finally about the age of teenagers, Dora, Cross, and Maru are able to put in so much preliminary work that the Loomer village elders actually approve of the plan for the canal, and the village will entirely begin work on the canal, meaning the three will no longer have to work alone. Maru and Cross are shocked by how many people showed up, and Jabaroma, the diplomat that we met in chapter 2 who worked with both Mino and Usami and is bringing the entire Sumerian people over to Earth, is actually one of the village elders working with Dora. And honestly, based off the interactions with this character in this chapter, he does seem to be a genuinely decent person. Dora even being able to clown around and joke with Jabaloma, despite Jabaloma's more serious diplomatic personality. brutality. In the crowd of workers for the canal, Cross sees the old Sumerian people that he beat up multiple years ago over sabotaging the canal. And remembering Dora's words, he goes over to them and bows in forgiveness, saying that he was in the wrong for hitting them and he hopes that they can all work together to work on the canal. And surprisingly, the Sumerian is more than happy to accept Cross's apology, as Cross looks back to Dora and Maru, admitting he finally understands what it means to coexist, making Dora laugh as the craftsmen finally get to work on building their canal, which is extremely hard, difficult, and long work, as it takes multiple years, to where Maru and Cross both look about the age they are now in the current timeline of Modulo. With the canal complete and ships able to pass through the sea route entirely and no more need for a detour, the Loomer people actually receive an official request from the Discante people. The moment that Dora waited for multiple years finally came, when the Discante people wanted to build port facilities along the canal and re-begin trade between the two lost tribes. With the budget already approved and the present of good faith already sent over to the Discante people, the last thing they need is a full unanimous vote with all the elders, as everybody knows once the port opens, it will thrive and strengthen the flow of trade between both tribes. When, despite everyone being happy, Cross notices Jabaloma is the only one that seems upset by all of this. Cross noting that he's never once seen Jabaloma angry or spread resentment in all of the years that he's known him, and is surprised to see Jabaloma act this way about such a happy thing. However, Cross realizes that even though they all carry wounds from the Discante's isolationist policies, Jabaloma is the only one that actually lost a flesh and blood daughter because of them. Jabaloma admits it's been about 10 years since he lost his daughter to the Discante, and despite reopening trade between Loomer and Discante being an overall good thing for their people, Cross knows that despite wanting to bury that pain, Jabaloma can't get rid of all of it. However, being able to endure that for the good of his people makes Cross respect Jabaloma, as he immediately gets over his emotional feelings and asks where the best suitable location to establish ports would be. And conversations already move on to how we can best serve the Sumerian people today. And as everyone opens jugs and drinks and celebrates, getting absolutely wasted in all of the celebration that they have long awaited, finally achieving what they think might be the time for turning around for the better, Cross even admits to himself that he started to think everything was going to go okay. That was at least until the day that everything changed, when history once again repeated itself and the Kerrion devoured the daughter of the Discante's chief, and we're left with a cliffhanger without knowing exactly what happened, but knowing how it all ends before it even started, with a shocking tragedy that completely destroys all of the work that these poor people put in for coexistence. Something that takes years to build takes just seconds to break. But guys, thank you so much if you made it this far into the end of the video. Hit the like button if you don't want to miss any future videos that may come out, and subscribe to not miss the official chapter review when the official chapter releases. I appreciate you guys making it this far, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.